Hi again. I just pulled the Mikuni parts out of the carburetor cleaner, let it sit overnight. I was going to let it sit 24 hours, but I got a little hurried on it. To start with, I failed yesterday to miss a gasket. And this is the float bowl baffle plate. And it has one gasket on each side of that. And yesterday this was stuck to the plate. I didn't notice it. It went into the carb cleaner, but it didn't hurt it. So it's going to be fine. So I'll put that in first. That slips on the body like that. And there's a recess in the carburetor body, and so I want to fit that plate down in there fully. There you go. Now, the gasket, the one that I did pull off, it goes in place like so. Next thing I'll do is I will take the seat for the float, and I'll screw that into place. Now that takes a 9mm, as I recall yesterday. Yep, a 9mm socket fits that nicely. So I snug that down. Now I will drop the float in there next, I believe is what I do. I'm no expert on this, so bear with me. There's the small spring that I pulled off. And I will slide that on again. It fits into a groove on the float seat. And I did not get that. Let me try it again here. Nope, I'm not able to get it. I have to use some needle nose pliers. Goes in that groove. Woo! Can't get it. Let's see. This is why I hate to take carburetors apart. You have to put them back together. Sometimes it's not a lot of fun. Okay, I've got it on there now. It goes that spring goes into a small groove cut in to the seat piece. So I've got it in place now. The next thing to go on, I think, will be the float lever. And as I recall, that went on like this. And I may have that upside down. I think I do. I believe it goes on like this. And then the pin goes through the holes in the casting. And then goes through the float lever. And just gets pressed into place there in the float lever. There, that's tight. Whoop. So, float goes up and down, raises, closes the needle, hopefully. Next thing to go in this area of the carburetor will be the main jet holder. That doesn't have a washer around it. That takes a 10 millimeter. I like to use a socket when I can. It just protects the flats a lot better. So I'm going to snug that down. And then while I'm thinking about it, I'll put the main jet in place. These parts, after I pulled them out of the parts cleaner, I've already washed them with a boiling hot water and then blew everything out with a air hose. I use low pressure. I like to use no more than about 60 or 70 pounds on a carburetor. There's no reason to get carried away with it. And all you do with the high pressure is wedge some junk in a small passage somewhere, so we don't want to do that. Float bowl will go right on there. I'm not gonna mess with setting the floats because, like I said in the other video, on a Mikuni you do not want to mess with setting the floats. They're set at the factory. They're very difficult to set, and this has a small depression there, which I believe goes around that, and the wider depression goes around those. Let's see if that's correct. Yep, it goes right on there. You can see how the main jet sits in that, I call it a drain nut. I don't know exactly what the right term is for it. Put these two screws in here with the clips towards the intake side of the carburetor, and the other two screws, each has a lock washer, goes into that side. Use a Phillips screwdriver to snug these guys down. I like the clips pointing to the outside because the overflow hoses are going to run through them. Get this last one run down. You know, most things that take a multiple of bolts to hold them on, be it a cylinder head, a flange, or carburetor body, I like to tighten things sequentially in kind of an X pattern. You don't really have to torque a carburetor down, but you want it to be flat and evenly pressed down against the gaskets. I guess it would be possible to warp one if you tightened everything at once and then went around and tightened the second one, then the third one, then the fourth one. I like to cross them back and forth. Okay, we got that in place there. So here we have the next thing I see anyway is the idle screw, and I'm just going to run that in there just enough to hold it with the spring on it. Nothing magic about that. That sticks out. You probably can't see it, but inside where my scribe is, that's the end of the idle screw. That rides in the slide, and again, it may be difficult to see with the light, but that rides just about where my scribe is pointing to. You can see a little indentation in the slide perhaps, and that's from that needle going in against that ramp, and as it does that, it raises the slide up, which lifts the needle out of the seat, makes for a faster idle. Pretty simple. Okay, there's the carb top, and I've got the fitting with the lock nut. I'll just screw that in there now. I'll run it all the way up to the top because that's the way I found it. And I'll just snug this down for now with a crescent wrench. Here's the washer, the first one I had removed when I took it apart. It goes onto the drain for the carburetor float bowl. So I'm going to put that on next. And again, I'm just going to snug it down with a crescent wrench. Okay, we're over here at the low speed. I'm going to put that spring in there first. Here's the low speed needle. And I will screw it in to the full depth till it seats. Gotta get a screwdriver. Okay, so I'm going to turn that in till it seats. Alright, and then yesterday I counted 7/8 of a turn out. So that'll put it exactly where I had it, which it was running good the last time I used the carburetor. So there's a little less than a half, and there's a half. That makes 7/8 right there. This washer goes inside the top of the carburetor, like so. And here we have the enrichment lever plunger and the enrichment lever. So we'll put that on. That goes on like as an assembly like this. There is a rubber boot. Let me get that. The rubber boot that I had a bit of a problem getting off yesterday. I'll put that on now. It's probably as difficult to get back on as it was to get off. I wouldn't expect anything less. Now you rotate it a little bit, and that helps to seat it on there. Now that clips into the top, if you can see it, of that notch of the plunger. Whoops. First you drop it through, then you clip it in. And that screws into place. As I recall yesterday, it took a 12mm wrench to work that. Let me see. I'll get it on here right. There is a small bent tab on this lever, and that goes against the carburetor, and that positions it correctly. I had it incorrectly positioned. But that's the way it goes, at right angles to the bore. Let me get a 12mm wrench.